Kate. Welcome to the Scenic Route podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my treat. How are you today?
I am doing very well, feeling good today, feeling like elated, I would say. It's been a good day.
Love to hear that. It's always, yeah, like if we always got to be appreciative of like, yeah, today has been like a good day.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so funny, right? Like that's such a like sweet, simple question, but we never really like we never like answer in the like with the full amplitudes of answers. It's always kind of like, yeah, fine, sure. And you're like,
Yep.
so I
I'm
love
fine.
that very much. Yeah, exactly. It's all good. They're like, it was been a good day. Sounded sincere and honest, and I love that. So, as we've heard, you're like a burnout recovery strategist. So, I suppose, apart from all the theoretical knowledge you got on that subject, you have a juicy personal story with it as well.
I do.
Do you want to tell us about how you burned out?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, my most significant, I think, really experience with burnout was about 10 years ago. It was, 2000 and oh no, I'm blanking on the year. So, but it was about 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 or 11, something like that. And
maybe it was like a cosmic, like, I don't know, star constellation, because my burnout was also like 2010, 2011. Maybe
yeah, I think it was like, I think it started about that time. I finally recognized it, I think, right around like 2013, like the end of 2013. And wow. I was working in higher education. I was working in a position within student affairs. I worked predominantly with fraternities and sororities on the college campus that I was at. So I had lots of nights, lots of weekends. I was finishing up the coursework for my PhD program, and I was in a really unhealthy relationship at the time. And all of these things, all of these things happening, were just, created this space where I knew I wasn't happy, but it was really a moment that it was, now I'm recalling. So it was November of 2013, and I had just finished up the oral presentation and defense for my written comps, and I had passed. And so I was feeling that same kind of elation and excitement relief about that. And I called my partner at the time and asked him to come pick me up. He had the car. And was, walked outside. This was in Wyoming, so it was really cold outside. And I thought, we only live, we live maybe like 5 minutes at most from the campus. So I was like, he'll be here in like any second. And he wasn't there within 5 minutes. And after, about 7 minutes, and then after that point, each moment that passed that he wasn't there yet, and I was standing in the cold, and of course I didn't go inside because I was just being stubborn in that aspect, but I just stood there getting madder and madder and madder and madder. And he finally, pulled up, and I opened the door, and he didn't even really acknowledge me, didn't say hi or, congratulations, or he knew, that day was kind of the oral, was a big day. He was on the phone with someone else. And so I got in the car, I buckled my seatbelt, and we pulled out of the parking lot. And I just remember like hitting the dashboard in front of me. And then I hit it again with my other hand. And I was just overcome with this anger when I had been so excited just, maybe half an hour before that. And I really realized in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I have become the worst version of myself.
Yeah. It's almost like there's a point, and it takes a long time, but there's know it from my burnout journey. There is one singular moment where you're like, shit, who is this person?
Absolutely.
It's not me, or I hope it's not, because it's not who I want to be.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely a version of myself that I was like, I don't want to be this version. And no wonder other people didn't really want to be around me either, because I was just kind of this, angry, sad, hurt person in this aspect. And I would say that had about a year buildup to it. So I spent, in that year, and looking back at that, I spent a lot of time saying things like, if I can just get to the end of the day, I'll have some time I can rest. If I can just get to the weekend, then I'll have some downtime. I'll be able to take some time to rest. If I can
That's
just get to the end of this semester, if I can just get to the vacation, if I can just get to this holiday. And I spent over a year saying, if I can just get, instead of really taking ownership and addressing, the recovery that I needed and the stress management that I needed and that work-life integration that I needed.
Yes.
And so after hitting the dashboard, that next day I made an appointment with a counselor, because I knew at that aspect, I was like, I'm no longer in a place where I can do this on my own. Like I'm too far past that.
Yes.
I need some support. I need some help.
Yes. Yeah. And that's like such a good moment. Like I realized, like, I know the moment for me was, I was working. It was back when it was my first job after graduating from my master's, and it was in an agency, and agency life is crazy anyway, but this was particularly crazy for all the wrong reasons. And I was working 70-hour weeks. It was mad. And I was just working, too many projects. Everything was mad. And I think like 6 months in, it was just, I never had time to actually slow down and like think and it only worked for like 6 months, because I don't know, I'm kind of like an efficiency freak, and I've optimized everything that there was to optimize. And it was like a well-oiled machine, and everything came crashing down when I went to the shop, and I wanted to get my favorite yogurt, and they were out of stock. And that little thing caused me to spiral, because I couldn't get my yogurt. I was planning on getting that yogurt. Like the rest of the day was structured for me, like to me after getting that yogurt.
Yeah.
I was in the shop, like bawling my eyes out. My partner, bless his heart, he was like, this is not about the yogurt, is it? And I'm like, no,
it's never about the yogurt.
It's never about yogurt. But that was like the moment where like, I'm no longer feeling crispy. This is actually, shit got serious, and I need help. And I cannot get out of this by myself. I no idea how. And then you got counseling. And how was the recovery like period for you?
Yeah. So my recovery was, I would say it went fairly quickly once I got the professional help and recognized some of the areas. And I really took some ownership of changing habits and really making changes in my day-to-day and how that worked. I also did things like left that relationship, and that helped in some aspects. So sometimes it is thinking about, okay, what aspects of my life are no longer serving me.
It is actually big things. And sometimes it was leaving that job, because that job was toxic.
Yeah. I started looking into other jobs. And so I knew it was time. I was like, I think it's time for me to transition, from this position to another position or another campus. And so eventually I did end up moving to a new place, to a new job. But some of the key things that I remember working on with my counselor, and that I, continue to work on even now, is that even with those transitions that took place, I still had recovery work to do. Like there were still habits that I needed to do day to day to support myself and not getting back into that burnout place. Right. And I think that that's kind of one of those misnomers that we often come up with. And when it comes to burnout, we're like, okay, I'm recovered. I'm good. Like I don't ever have to think about burnout again. And I was like, oh, but it has a sneaky way. It has a sneaky way of showing back up in our lives because we have daily stresses, because we have daily, burn events, because we have these things that happen. And unless we have a pretty regular kind of recovery process, we tend to slip back into that burnout space, but we don't realize it until, we're hitting the dashboard or our yogurt's not available.
Yes. Yeah. That's the interesting thing. Like I mean, with my job, I got burned. so badly because I took that job because it was good on paper, and although my intuition, my inner wisdom told me, oh, don't ever set a foot in there, and I went anyway. So I had to do a lot of recovery, also from that, of like,
well, just the trusting yourself again and listening to your gut again.
And the funny thing is, I also felt like, okay, I recovered quite quickly. And then when I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2017, I was like, oh, maybe I just glossed over some parts. Because, oh, hello, knock, knock. There are a lot of things that were like, oh, yeah, they're resurfacing.
Yes.
So probably with a cause. And I've liked what you called what you call burn events. Right? Probably most people would call it triggers. Is that right? Or
I think they're really, I think they're right in line with what a lot of people kind of consider triggers and those kind of things. So burn events in my mind, and what I've coined as part of my research, are these they're activities, circumstances, things that happen throughout our day that lead us to feel fatigued, emotionally drained or overwhelmed. And so it could be a really heavy work day, just a heavy workload. It could be heavy, a heavy work week. It could be traveling for business. In that aspect, that's something that impacts me greatly, that I now have to prepare for differently and recover from differently. Than if I were traveling for a vacation or something to that effect. It could be something as small as, you get an email from a colleague and you interpret it as kind of snarky, and that sets, your stress.
Whatever
off in those
your
pieces.
insecurities are, or wherever you are in your, like, if let's say your burn space is like a 3-dimensional map with like 4 axes, wherever you are, in which field, which corner, it shows up differently, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. So really what the important piece and why I really want folks to understand and recognize their burn events when they're happening is, one, we can actually expect them. So some of these, we can look at our calendar and we know they're coming up. So we can actually plan for them and prepare for them in a different way. And we can have planned recovery already scheduled out for those times.
So when you do your weekly planning, you're looking specifically for like Wednesday afternoon potential burn event, or how how does it happen?
Yes. So you kind of look at Wednesday afternoon. So let's take like entrepreneur. So someone who is doing something, let's say that you have a product launch happening. And you know that, the lead up time and the week that the product is launching, it's going to be like, it's all hands on deck and it's really busy for that time. So in your calendar, you're thinking, okay, what are some things that I can do for myself during that week to make sure that I show up my best self that day, whatever that best self is. Do I need to think about how I move my body before each day? Do I need to think about my sleep? Water intake is a big one for me. So making sure that I have enough water and that I'm well hydrated makes a huge difference too. Or social aspects. Do I need to have a conversation with a loved one or a support person before I get into the day? Emotional aspect. Do I need to schedule a counseling appointment or a coaching appointment during that week, so I have someone to check in with? And then scheduling some more significant recovery time, like following that actual burn event. So following that launch week and that aspect. So maybe you're going to give yourself a half day to a full day to go out and do something you enjoy. Maybe it's, getting a hike in nature, or, going out to a lake or a beach, or whatever those things are that you enjoy, or just spending time, reading outside for the day to kind of recalibrate yourself after that burn event. So that's a really key piece, because when we don't recover from these burn events as they're happening, what we get into is that push through cycle, right? So we have a burn event and we're like, push through, burn event, push through.
Because that's a general advice. Through. Like, just push through. Just push
through. Just keep pushing through. And we end up pushing through until our body's like, or our mind is like, no, stop. And almost, and often happens at an inopportune time when we're like, well, I can't really be sick right now, or I can't really, have kind of the breakdown that I would like to have.
Allow blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah, in that aspect. And so because what has happened is the burn events have they've snowballed upon each other, they've compounded, and then they've created this burnout space. And so then we find ourselves, hitting the dashboard or crying when our yogurt's not available.
Yeah. And I mean, it's completely different if you tackle, like, as you've said, like a single snowball or like an avalanche. Like,
right. Yeah. The response is very different.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. And I also love that, like, two things I love about your approach. That like during your week, you actively pencil in and I don't know, anti-burn event activities.
Yep.
And like, because I often feel like as you said, oh, when I have that vacation, when I blah 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 blah, I feel like a lot of people, like, and I see that in my clients too, like, oh, I'm gonna wait. They're waiting for their, like, eat, pray, love moment. Like, when I have a half a year off to, like, think about myself and blah blah blah. And it's like, that's more for most of us. I'm sorry, love, but that's not gonna happen.
It's not gonna be the case. Yeah,
exactly. You have your eat, pray, love moments in between driving your kids to school, cooking lunch, scheduling clients, whatever. So it's, you have to find a way to be like, it's not like black or white. Like, the small bits do add up.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't see it.
Yeah.
And the second thing I really like about your approach is that you kind of like called the big, like, rebalancing events after, like, a potential burn event, that you're not calling them treats. Right?
No,
because
it is intentional time that you need to recalibrate. Like, it is a part of being productive, and you will not succeed in your productivity if you don't have this rest and recovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you always get this kind of,
they're not a treat. It is not a treat.
Or like a bubble bath. It's like, well, bubble bath is basic hygiene, so that's not a treat. And like, that's, it's not a treat. A treat is maybe, I've read the book and I feel relaxed, and I read another one. That might be the treat. But it's really, I need this time to decompress, to sort my thoughts, to regain strength. And I feel like most of my clients are women, and I do see a gender issue there.
Yes.
What's your experience?
Yeah, no, I have definitely experienced the same in regard to, I think humans who identify as women, and the experience that they have in, I think, in that pleasing nature. And a lot of this has been taught, right? So we've been taught to put others before ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we've been taught to, stay quiet and don't express your needs and those kinds of things, and to be giving and a lot of that has
be giving to others.
Yes. Be not giving yourself. To others. Yeah. Not self.
That's selfish.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, and so we've created this context where those of us who identify as women are really in this space that, it's like, you're not worthy unless you're giving to other humans. And we have forgotten that
we're already got
you are worth, like, you are worth giving to, because because you're human, like, and you are point blank, you're the most important creature in your life, because your life doesn't happen without you.
Yes. It's the same what I say. Like, most of my clients are service providers, and I always like, what the reframe that helps them is when I say, look, you're a service provider. For providing that service, the most important thing, the biggest asset, is you, the service provider. Yeah. So you got to take care of the most important asset first. Yeah. Right? Like, absolutely. And it just reminds me of the Ruby Kaur's book, Milk and Honey, where she has one page where it goes, how to love yourself is how to teach others to love you. Yes. Right? And this is so true, right? If we are not giving ourselves what we need in terms of, like, recalibration, decompression, downtime, whatever, we just, like, we are also part of the problem of creating, like, that image of ourselves of like that Duracell bunny who just, like, go. Yeah. Until we cannot anymore. We're kind of broken, falling apart. And then people are like, well, what happened to Jen? She used to do all these things and now she doesn't. And then I remember it was hard for me because I had to communicate, well, the rules of the game have changed. It cannot do that any longer.
Right.
It's not possible.
Yes.
So I had to do like a lot of working through shame because I felt like, hey, like people are so used to that I like organize, like I always like get in touch and like put events together and organize and bring people together and blah blah blah, and I love that. But it cannot be me push anymore all the time.
Right. Yeah.
That was hard.
Yeah. And that, and I think that that's a big part of the work, especially, for women in that aspect, because it's not just about, okay, I'm creating new habits. There has to be a release of that guilt and shame that comes along with putting yourself first.
Yes.
And recognizing the importance of that and honoring that truly is the most effective way that you can be there for others.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the life vest thing, right? Like,
it's hard to learn at first. Yeah, it is. It is a new way of thinking, and that can be really challenging at the start.
Yeah, like, and especially what I thought was so hard as well, right? Like all these stories, what we've been taught, like most of them, like the really deep ones, like the self-worth, the shame, the guilt, they most likely come from our formative years, so years 3-ish to 7, and like, so we carry that shit for like 30 plus years.
Yes.
So for me, it was really hard at the beginning to be like, is this me? Like, is this actually a part of me, a part of my character traits, or is it a story I've heard so much that I repeated it over and over until I've embodied it?
Yeah.
Like, how did you, like, how did you go about this when you had a burnout?
I think that was a lot of those pieces was like recognizing and breaking down those stories, right? And trying to, and I still will ask myself if I'm in a state of rest, or I am, giving myself that, I'm taking advantage of that recovery time and those kind of things. If I start to feel that guilt kind of come up, or that often it shows up for me as like, well, you should be cleaning the house. It's a should be statement, right?
It always is. Yes.
And when those start to come up for me, I generally ask, whose voice is this? Like, where is this coming from? Who is saying this? And then I kind of think, like, priority wise, like what is most important in this moment? What is going to help me the most in the next hour, in the next day, in this next week? And almost always it's get the rest. Doing the dishes really isn't going to have a huge impact in you in the next hour or so, or
bottom line whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. But getting the rest when I need to be creative, or I need to be, developing content and those kind of things later on, getting the rest absolutely helps.
Yeah. Or just basically able to function. Right? Yeah. Like I always, that's really great advice. Always like try to catch yourself if you go like, oh, I should.
Yeah.
No. I have this mantra. I've actually written it down on a lot of Post-it notes. You shall not do shoulds. I probably should get an embroidered cushion or something.
I know. I call it. I'm just like, stop shooting on yourself. Ooh. Just stop shooting on yourself.
Oh, now I want to have 2 embroidered cushions.
There you go. Right. They can be side by side.
Yeah. Well, that would be such an amazing set. Or like, it would also make great mugs.
Yes.
Okay, I totally see like a semi-group merch collection. I see it happening. This is gonna happen. I love it. Yeah, like it's so true, right? Like, and in that sense, like recovery and relaxation is revolutionary, right? Because we're always taught to go and define ourselves through what we crave, what output we generate, and just to actually be like, no, I want to create output. Yes, that's something different. But I'm not what I'm worth, who I am, is not tied to whatever I'm producing. That includes my children.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So what, like, so we said, okay, you can never, like, recovery from burnout, that's not something you're gonna achieve. It's kind of like you're an addict, you'll be an
I
addict
think
for
it's a
life,
consistent
most likely.
process. Yeah, I think it's a consistent process. So I think that we were always in some kind of recovery mode when it comes to burn events, burnout, and those kinds of things. Because my belief is that we can't avoid it completely, but we can absolutely, we can learn new ways of how to observe it. So how does it show up for us? How does it show up in our body? And the faster that we recognize that we've had a burn event, or that we're getting into burnout, the faster we can be like, okay, how can I shift my habits to prepare for the burn events a little bit differently? How can I shift my habits to recover more effectively throughout the day? And so what I have found in working with folks is that when they implement kind of this 3-phase process that I have of observation, preparation, and recovery, it really just becomes this habit cycle within their life, that they are almost constantly observing and recognizing their burnout, their burn events, stressors in their lives. They're always in a state of kind of preparation where they're always thinking about, okay, this is an upcoming burn event. How do I prepare for that a little differently? What's my recovery plan following this? And then their consistent recovery practices. So
how
things
can you
that they're
make that
doing
not itself a burnout, a burn event?
Well, one thing, I mean, I think that's important is I wouldn't say, like, when we set it up and establish it as like a goal. So like I will implement recovery as a goal. I think that sets us up for failure a little bit in this aspect, because that's
100%.
because we're trying to get to that ultimate place, like this perfection place. No, that's not how it works. If we think about it in more terms of like, what are some of the small micro steps that I can take that will help me feel more recovered at the end of the day, or the end of the week, or the end of the month, or the end of these really busy times that I can implement. And so that's things like, what's something that you can do for like 2 minutes to take a break throughout the day. You finish working, maybe you finish answering emails and you take 2 to 5 minutes to do, some breathing exercises, or you just simply get up and walk away from your desk and your computer and, step outside and just take a couple deep breaths of that fresh air. Or, just, taking a moment to just kind of pause and maybe shake your body a little bit. I love a dance party. So for me, it's like, I'm going to put on one of the songs from my Energy Burst, playlist.
What's your favorite Energy Burst song on your playlist?
Oh, there are a lot. But one of my favorites is, let's see. One of my favorites is actually This Is Me from The Greatest Showman. That's a good one for Energy Burst, because it's also kind of just like empowering and uplifting. And my go-to of all time will always be Don't Stop Believing.
Oh, Journey.
By Journey.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And most songs are, at most 5 minutes long. And so quick 5-minute dance break. And then you can kind of get back into your thing. So really thinking about the small ways that we can implement recovery into our lives, and what are ways that we can, implement, recovery in things that we're already doing. So
and not waiting for the Eat, Pray, Love.
Right. Yeah. I have a Post-it note on my mirror that I read while I brush my teeth, and it's got some of my kind of just general affirmations for the day. And it says, I will be joyful. I will be calm. I will do my work honestly. I will give love and respect to every living thing. And I will live with an attitude of gratitude. And I read that over and over again in the 2 minutes I'm brushing my teeth.
Or just getting up in the morning and before you check your phone, be like, today's going to be a good day.
Today's going to be a good day.
Today's a great day.
Yeah. I'm thankful I woke up today.
There you go.
So there are lots of little ways that we can implement this into our life. And I think the big thing to support us is really thinking about it and what are those small steps we can take.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I mean, and that's what also like the Scenic Route is all about, right? Like we're taking small steps continuously, right? We know that we get there, but that knowing, or like, I mean, let's say logically, our brain knows that you have 100 yards. If you do 1 yard every day, you get there, right? Like, but embodying this is like a different ballpark. And like, to really be in the knowing and embodying that, yes, my pace will move me like further, closer to where I want to be, and things will add up, will compound. But I feel this is like, when I talk to my clients, especially the ones who are earlier on in their entrepreneurial journey, they're like, oh, this is so easy for you to say, like, you've done it.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't get any easier. B, like, I started at one point, and I didn't start with like the big things. Like, I started with like, I don't know, cursing at my mentor, my mentor and my coach and my therapist for like, this is not gonna do shit if I do breathwork for 30 seconds. Right? Like, because I couldn't believe that I could shift big things with like a minute of breathwork a day. Like, completely downplaying the minor things to wait for the big magical time opening where I can do all the things. What's kind of like, if I would be your client, what would you hit me over the head with?
Yeah. I always push back and be like, well, you don't know until you try it in that regard. So I understand that you think that it might not work, but let's give it a try and see how that goes. I will make people do it with me on a session in that aspect.
Yes.
But the bigger thing, and I think the thing that we need to keep in mind is that when we are thinking about habit creation and habit forming, what we are doing is retraining the neural pathways within our brain. And the reason why it feels hard at first is because our brains like patterns. They like consistent patterns because it's much easier. It uses less energy and effort and those kinds of things. So you already have patterns established. You have neural pathways established in your mind. And these are the neural pathways that are keeping you probably in this stress state, in this burnout state. And so it's going to feel a little uncomfortable when you start to redirect those pathways into a more relaxed state, into, a more kind of recovered state in that aspect. But as you continue and you keep up with that consistency, before you know it, you're not thinking about it anymore. You are taking your 5-minute break and you're just doing the breath work on your own.
Yeah. It's the same like taking your vitamins, brushing your teeth at one point.
Yeah.
Be like,
And so it's
I've always done this.
Yeah. It is going to feel harder at first just because we're rewiring our brain.
Yeah. It's actually learning to be comfortable in the discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely, I wish I had the magic wand. I wish I could just, wave it and everyone is like experiencing, this, happier, healthier self within themselves. But we all have a journey to get there in that aspect. Yeah. And I think it's important to remind folks that being in a recovered state from burnout doesn't mean that you don't have times of stress. It doesn't mean that you don't have times where you're overwhelmed or you feel drained or fatigued. Those things still happen. The burn events are still happening. You just respond to it in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, otherwise it would mean you probably log yourself in a room and wait until that causes a burn event, right?
Like, yeah, because we're not meant to be alone.
Exactly. Like, I mean, life is gonna happen, and it's gonna throw curveballs, right? It's just, but I feel it's really what you've said, like, to actually be able to kind of like identify it, actually really before it could potentially happen. And then like spot it when it's happening, to be like, I'm I'm not like, oh, this
Like,
is not discomfort. Like,
I'm feeling a little crispy here. What's happening? What's happening? Yeah.
exactly. And then to kind of realize, oh, okay, like, is it, as you said, just feeling crispy, or am I like full steam ahead to feeling really burned out?
Yes.
Are there like a different, like from like your research, are there like stages that we go through from like feeling crispy to burnout?
Mm-hmm. Not necessarily stages, but I would say some of the things to kind of keep an eye on to kind of distinguish, am I, am I experiencing a burn event, or am I really truly in like this place of full on burnout, is really thinking about kind of three key things. So if you have lost the joy or passion or connection to the work that you had and that you once had that. So it's something, and it doesn't necessarily have to be work. You can get burned out on volunteering. You can get burnt. I've worked with parents who are like, I'm burned out on parenting. And
show me a
so,
mother who's not burned out by motherhood.
But
like,
yes, absolutely. Right. But no longer having that joyful experience that you used to have with work. And then it starts to feel so, and if it's starting to feel unmanageable. So if you're waking up in the morning, and you're waking up more mornings than not feeling like, oh, this is too much, I don't even know where to start. That's more in line with like burnout. Yeah. But consistent overwhelm, in that it's,
that's a good
feels
marker.
So unmanageable that we just like don't even know what to do. And then it also starts to feel as though the work or that activity starts to feel like it's a burden. It's just hard. Completing things are hard. Starting things are hard. Everything's about hard. It feels hard. And you might have like a day of that after a burn event or something to that effect. Yes. But if you're waking up more days of the week than not with those feelings, then you're probably in a place of burnout, and probably in a place where getting some support to help you start your recovery is going to be important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How would you like, where, if at all, how could like escapism like fall into that, right? Like where you realize, like, I mean, I saw that with a lot of my friends who had kids. Like, it started with a glass of rosé at the end of the day, and then suddenly it was a glass of rosé every night, and then it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of actually 2 glasses, maybe it's 3 glasses of rosé every night. So, and it was clearly a form of escapism to cope with things. How would you say is escapism in any form, like drugs, food, shopping? Like, we all know everyone has like their different, everyone knows exactly what they're doing when they're escaping.
Yes.
How are these like tied into what we say?
Yeah, I think that's something that can easily kind of come up, and in a way can kind of almost be a slippery slope too, because sometimes some of those things are things that we might use as part of our recovery aspect. So it might, part of my recovery, and one of the things that I do for recovery is having, a glass of wine with friends or my husband or something to that effect. But I know that it's not necessarily about the glass of wine. It's about the connection that I'm making with the people and building the community and those kinds of things. Or even if it's, having the glass of wine by myself, it's about the enjoyment of what it tastes like and those kinds of things. It's not about the goal.
Social aspect.
Yeah, the goal is different. And I think that that's how we kind of can get into that escapism
the goal and intention as well.
Yeah, is if our goal and intention, even if it may be subconscious at some point, where it's like, well, I want to disconnect, or, I need to, sometimes we use it like, well, it helps me relax.
Yeah, I'll take the edge off or something.
Yeah, it takes the edge off, those kinds of things. And I think we just want to be aware of when we're using that language and in any activity with that, and how often are we doing it. And the other piece that I think makes it, when we get into a space of like, maybe this is more of a problematic behavior than a helpful behavior, is it having a negative impact on the rest of our lives? So with the example of like the glass of rosé, are you waking up in the morning feeling groggy and icky and having a hard time getting going for the day because you're still metabolizing alcohol?
Yeah.
your body is still working through, the alcohol you had the night before, or is it having an impact on your life in other ways? If it's shopping, is that having an impact on your credit, or the amount of money you have available to do other things? And so thinking about it in terms of that piece,
the ripple effect, sort of.
Yeah, the ripple effect. Is it truly bringing you like recovery and relaxation and stress relief, or is it actually creating more stress because it's having a negative impact on your life?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So like before we go into your brilliant gift you have, which is super like gonna help everyone to kind of like reflect and identify burnout and burn events, I always gonna ask one last question because I'm super curious and I always need more. What book are you currently reading?
I am currently reading a couple of different books, but I am digging back into The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Which is just a great, it's kind of written in a fable, mindset, but it really talks about the foundations and what we need to build a great team. And of course, the foundational piece is trust, and how do we get there?
Yeah, trust and how to get there. Yeah, the scarcest, that could be like an entirely different episode, like the scarcest resource we've got left, trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of my job. So that would, yeah, like I'm always interested in like, oh, okay, I need more books because I don't know. Not that I don't have like a Kindle reading list that's a mile long, but anyway.
Same.
I don't know. I feel like I have two personalities, the one who buys books and the one who reads them. Yeah. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
You are not alone in that. No.
So Kate, tell us, how can people find you online, and tell us more about your brilliant burnout recovery reflection journal?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me online. I am on all the social media platforms at Dr. Kate Steiner. And so I'm probably most active on Instagram if you want to find me there. My website is liftwellnessconsulting.com. And the freebie that I have for you all is a burnout recovery reflection journal, which is going to help you identify those burn events that we talked about. It's going to help you identify what burnout looks like for you. So how it shows up physically, emotionally, and what is the difference between your burned out state and your happiest, healthiest state in those aspects. And it's going to kind of take you through some key ideas when it comes to recovery practices. So some of the things that are on there are things like, how are you implementing play into your life? What is your comfort list? So what are the things that comfort you? Are you taking time for gratitude? So really walking through some of those processes.
I love that, because sometimes we're so deep into it and we have no idea what to do. So I love that. It's also like but I love that it's actually getting your thoughts out on paper, because that's the different ball game. Yeah. And then people really like, hey, look, these are ideas that helped other people. And I hope you feel inspired and curious to give it a try too, and see how you feel.
Absolutely.
I love that. Hey, Kate, it was an absolute blast to have you here on the show. It was amazing to talk to you. And thank you so much for joining me on my part of the scenic route.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.